Dear writer, you need to quit. This is the show that helps you know what to quit, what to keep, and what to question. My name is Becca Syme, and I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach with thousands of hours of coaching 6 and 7 figure authors, mid-listers, major award winners, and new authors alike because everyone needs to quit something. Anyone can tell you what worked for them, and of course they say it might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. Well, I can tell you why. Welcome to the QuitCast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the QuitCast. This is episode 24, where we're going to talk about writer burnout or creative burnout and something I call the pit, which I know sounds super exciting and fun, and it's going to be it's not going to be a great place to be, but I do think it's going to bring a lot of us some resolution to be able to talk about this. So we've talked in our burnout series through our energy stores and how those are measured, and in the energy pennies one, we've talked about what our capacity is in our plate size, which was number 2. And then last week we talked about the slide, which is the inertia building sort of slide down into what we're going to talk about today, which is the pit. The pit is what most of us think of as that feeling of burnout. If you think of your capacity for energy as a well, like a gas tank, then the pit is the burned out bottom of your energetic gas tank. It's something that has no capacity left in it. It has no ability to produce any more energy. Sometimes there's even a hole punched in it because you burned out so hard, you came down that slide so hard that there's just no capacity to make energy whatsoever. And so the pit has a couple of really important characteristics. The first of which is that it is dry, it's empty. And that's why I say the burned out bottom of your energetic gas tank, because there is no more capacity. Some of the characteristics of being in the pit itself are that you will have a hard time waking up in the morning. You might have difficulty doing the same tasks that you used to do. It might take you twice as much energy to do the same thing that used to happen. Your ability to make creative energy happen is basically gone. A lot of people who are in the pit of burnout will actually sit in front of their computer and over again try and do something creative, and they just are not capable of doing it. And that happens over a long enough period of time that they start to realize that it's not just I'm stuck, or it's not just there's something else going on. It's I've run out of my capacity to make energy in this energetic gas tank, and now I'm just sitting down here in the empty darkness, and it's it can be very lonely down there. It definitely is not energizing, and it's the opposite of energizing. Some of the reason I think it's important to talk about this metaphor is because a lot of people don't realize that that's what's happening when they get down there. They think, oh, I just need to be more motivated. Oh, I need to find the right way to get myself out of this funk. And they don't realize that sometimes the trying to re-engage with work is actually the thing that's going to make the burnout last longer. It's that the pit doesn't have a ladder out of it naturally. Once you slide down into the burnout pit, that there's no way out except to build yourself a ladder. And we're going to talk more about that next week. But I want to talk about why some of this happens so that it'll be easier for us to understand, because one of the first steps to starting to build the ladder out is to acknowledge that it's going to take something different to get you out of the pit than it took to get you in. Most of us get into the pit off of that slide of inertia burnout because we're working too hard, we're trying to do too much, we've got too much on our plate, and we don't have enough capacity to produce the energy that's required to complete all of the things that are on our plate. And of course, because we're human, we think that the energy will naturally produce itself from somewhere, because when we're operating on all cylinders, it kind of feels that way. Like it usually feels like, well, somehow I just wake up and I'm able to put one foot in front of the other, until you're not. And if you've ever had a depressive episode before, you'll understand what this feels like. Or if you suffer from major depression on a regular basis, like, you'll understand this feeling, and you may be able to communicate it better to people who have never experienced it. And people who have regular depression cycles, or who have major depression episodes, or who suffer from depression, can also go through burnout. It's just that they're more familiar with what that feels like. And so people who don't have those episodes or don't have that cycle are often unfamiliar with this experience. They wake up and they can't produce energy, and they don't understand what's going on. And they might know that they've been operating on a very high level for a long time, but sometimes the cause for burnout is not just like, I worked, work, 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 work. Sometimes it can be mental. It can be mental fatigue, but it can also be a mental psych out. It can be physical illness. It can be a combination of factors. It can be instability in the environment. There's a lot of different things that can produce this burnout at different levels. And depending on how hard and fast we went down the slide to get here, and how big the inertia was that pushed us in here, it can take longer to get out of the pit than we think that it might. The good news is there's a way out, right? Like, there's always a way out of the burnout pit. The bad news is that it's sometimes not intuitive about how we get out of this cycle. Because what's always helped us before, potentially, like many of us who have high drive or who have a hard work ethic, what's always helped us before is to make lists and to try to work our way out of it, and to get back on track, as it were. And I just need to get my mojo back, right? Well, sometimes that is true. If you're going through one of the sort of blip burnouts, as we call it, where it's a very slow slip and then a very quick ride back up to normal, then absolutely it might just be that there's a funk. But when the funk is lasting for a while and you're not able to work your way out of it, then recognizing that you are in the pit of major burnout is super important. Why do I think it's so important for us to talk about this? Because our industry as writers is moving at a fever pitch. And of course, if you know anything about fevers, if you don't do something to release the fever, eventually the whole body is going to get sick and it's going to die. Like, the body will die if the fever is too high, right? So the fever pitch can't just stay sustained forever. And recently, this last week, I was in New York at a writing conference, very big writer conference, more than a couple thousand people. And one of the consistent things that I kept hearing from people is, it feels different here. It feels different here than it's felt in years before. And it was all kinds of people from all different backgrounds, from all different platform levels. Everyone was feeling this different kind of fever pitch. And none of the workshops were causing it. Like, no one who was there caused it. It's something that has been happening in the industry over time, as we've been building and building and building our push, our momentum, our inertia. And eventually we're going to run too hot and too hard, and the whole thing is going to come crashing down. And then we're all at some point going to end up in burnout. Most of the coaching appointments that I did when I was there at this national conference had something to do with either people on the slide or already in the pit or on the ladder up out of burnout. And it's just such a consistent thing, because the pace of the industry is driving people so hard and so fast that we are not taking care of ourselves, and we're not stopping to check on our self-care and making sure that we have the capacity to continue doing this. And when I say the capacity to continue doing it, I don't mean that I'm able to get up tomorrow and continue working 100 hours a week. What I mean is, do you have the ability to produce this energy for the long term? And a very rare few people absolutely will. And some people thrive on this sort of super high level, big plate ability to get a ton done and to be constantly busy. And it's their absolute happy place and they love it. And some people are not wired for that. And when they try to model or mimic other people who are like that and they don't get the same results, they get frustrated, then they can actually hit burnout faster. And it ends up being a more difficult thing to get out of, because they can't release these expectations that they should be able to operate on this same very high functioning level as a set of outliers who are extremely happy up there at that very high production level. And the downside of this as an industry is that whether we like it or not, everything that everyone does impacts everyone else. So the ways that people break rules has an effect on people who don't break rules. The way that people make money has an effect on people that don't make money, and vice versa. The way that people act and talk and think and are has an impact on everyone else, because this industry is a system in the same way that our writing lives are a system, or our networks or communities are systems. When one part of the system is faltering, the whole system will eventually either not run at optimal peak speed or ability, or it will fail. And what I'm worried is, in past years when I've gone to conferences before, I've absolutely have seen random cases of people burning out. It's normal to see it every once in a while. And I still will take those people and coach them through the burnout. And that's not abnormal. What feels more abnormal is the sheer volume of people that I'm seeing having some form of this complaint about feeling like they just don't feel like they have what it takes, or they can't keep up the pace, or they can't do whatever it is that they have to do, or they don't know what to choose, or they have decision fatigue, or any number of things that are causing us to hit this fever pitch. But the problem with that fever is that just like when you get super, super sick and you get knocked flat and end up in bed and not able to function, that's what is going to happen to us, either on an individual level, or, and I hope this doesn't happen, but, or as a collective level with an industry, that the industry itself emotionally or energetically might end up on its back because we have pushed the fever pitch too hard. And the thing that I'm worried about this is because that pit is so counterintuitive and it's so difficult to get out of, in the sense of you have to shift your mindset about what your expectations are. And sometimes you have to release some expectations that you had been holding that would have gotten you into this burnout in the first place. And that is a very hard thing for most of us to do. First of all, because it's hard to know that that's where you are. Like, unless you've heard someone talk about their own burnout experience before, or you've been through it before, it's very hard to know that what's happening to you isn't just a lack of motivation. It's not your laziness. It's not that you don't want it bad enough. It literally is that you burned out your gas tank and you're sitting in this blackened bottom, almost bottomless pit of your burnout, and you don't know it. And it's taking you twice as much energy to do the things that you used to do, and you have much less ability to accomplish tasks throughout the day. But the crazy part is that your desire to get things done may not actually change that much, depending on your personality. And I've seen a lot of people who have very high drive, high work ethic, push personalities, and strengths finder, things like activator, achiever, focus, competition, significance, those types of strengths. I've seen people who have those still want to expect the same level of production from themselves, even when their body and their spirit and their energy and everything about them is telling them, you can't do this. There's not enough in the well, but they still feel this drive to continue to produce. And that's only going to make the pit last longer and get harder to get out of. And part of the problem is that because you have to actually rebuild your capacity to hold energy, because your body and your brain really are so used to expending things as quickly as they can because of the inertia that you've been using to get yourself over that hump and down into the slide, then you almost have to teach yourself to think a little bit differently for a short period of time. So that's the bad news, right? The bad news is the pit is a real place. And if you burn yourself out, you will end up there, and there is no way out other than to build your ladder. But the good news is that building a ladder is completely possible. And I'm going to give you just a couple of tips about that before we actually talk more about the ladder next week. But I don't want to leave you in this discussion about the pit without some ray of sunshine to come through that it's possible to get out of it. And you can also ask me questions in the comments below if you would like to know more about ladders or if you come across this later and have questions. But there is a way out of the pit. And if you think of yourself as a creator in that pit, essentially what you have to do is you have to create the materials to build this ladder, and then you have to create the ladder itself. And it doesn't get built out of more work. Like, it doesn't get built out of the stuff that got you down into the pit in the first place. Unfortunately, the only way to repair it is to take the things that bring you a lot of energy and do those as much as possible, and not to try to do anything that drains you too quickly, or you're going to end up sliding back down into the pit again. And so being really, really conscious of my job when I know for sure that I'm in the middle of burnout and I'm down in that pit, my job is to take care of myself. And my to-do list items all need to include some form of energy production, things that bring me energy. And the way that I always try to help people think about this is, when you're doing something that you really love and you feel that energy production happening, and right around here somewhere, you're going to feel kind of a little bit of flutter or burn, where it's I'm so excited about this, I can't wait for this to happen. And that's the kind of thing that is going to help you produce energy, not fear, which starts to move down a little bit, right? Like, we don't want to get into the fear places, which is like, I'm afraid, or I'm afraid and I'm nauseated or terrified, or those kinds of things. That's not the feeling we're looking for. We want that really core, happy, excited, energetic thing. The problem is that for some of us, this might look like laying on the couch and watching television or movies. It might look like not working and spending time with our significant other, our partner, our spouse, our friends. It might look like having long conversations. It might look like sleeping. But for some of us, though, that recovery from burnout is going to look like having some kind of productivity in other areas. Probably not in the creative ones, because if you haven't read the How Do You Make Creative Energy part, go back and watch the Energy Pennies one, which was the first one on the burnout, and I will link to that in the show notes. But there are very different levels of what kind of energy you can produce with the energy that you're creating. And so you have to be really conscious of, I want to do as much as I can in those very low cost activities that are going to help me to have more and more energy. Most people will find some kind of energetic refillment by doing things like exercising. And so the more you can have this, either I'm going to move my body, or I'm going to take a walk and think about things. Like, some of you who have a lot of thinking strengths are going to want to, in your pit, you're going to want to spend some time thinking and dreaming, and even having those kind of futuristic or ideation moments where you're having these creative thoughts, but you may not necessarily act on them. And it may just be that that's what's giving you the fuel to get out of it. And what you need to think of yourself as doing is, I have to refill this to a certain extent while I'm still down here, because that bottom burned out place is very fragile and very vulnerable to being burned out quickly again. And that energy that's at the very bottom is the quickest to expend. And that's why the slide exists, which we talked about last week, is because once you get down to your absolute last stores of energy that you have, and you're trying to create creative energy over and over and over again, you burn out fast and burn out fast and burn out fast. So for some of us, this experience of being in the pit of burnout is going to last a long time, because we don't have a ton of space in our everyday life to be able to really consistently take a break. Some of us, it's going to be shorter because we can activate ourselves or sort of achieve ourselves, do to-do list checking off, or be productive in other areas, or continue to function well in something like a day job or a relationship. And then we can come out of burnout faster. But we have to do the things that fill us, that make us feel connected, that make us feel whole, that make us feel confident. And we have to regain that energy before we can get back out. Like, really, the process of building the ladder is super important. But the problem is that it's not just there for us to grab, like, because one of the facets of burnout is that when you hit that bottom, the ladder's gone. And so you have to completely reconstruct your tank from scratch and your ladder from scratch. So one of the reasons I do this and say we're going to talk about these two things separately is that some of us are in the middle of this and we have gone down the slide, or we see ourselves, we're on the slide and we know this is coming, or we can feel that it's already happened, and we are trying desperately to keep meeting deadlines and producing books and work our way out of it. And sometimes you have to quit doing that stuff in order to stop from getting more and more burned out. Because the more you do damage to the bottom of that gas tank, the more, and really it's the stress that happens. Like we talked about this in the first episode, that consistent stress over time is going to do a lot of damage to your neural nets. And so the less stress you can put on yourself, the better. Not pressure. Pressure and stress are different. Some of us really thrive under pressure, but negative stress that causes fear. And we have to be really conscious of when we are feeling fear and acting out of fear. And that's usually a big, giant red flag that something needs to be fixed. Now, next week, we're going to hopefully finish the burnout series, unless something else major comes up that people want to talk about. And I'll be honest, a lot of the conversations that I had at this national conference were definitely about some form of this burnout, about burnout recovery and how that goes. But I do want to make sure to talk specifically about the latter next week. In the interim, if you have questions about how to help, or what you need to do, or some ideas, please ask them in the comments below. We would love to help you in any way that we can. And so I want to say to those of you who are in the pit right now, absolutely, I've been there. I know what that feels like. I know how frustrating it is to even feel like you have a desire and a motivation to do something and to not be able to complete it because you just don't have the energy to make it happen, and you don't have the creative brain space to make it happen. That is not something that's weird about you. It's not something that's wrong with you. It's absolutely and completely normal. And it's also fixable. And it's fixable in several ways. And we're going to talk more in depth about those next week. But if you don't do anything other than just accept that this is where you are, and it really sucks that you're here, nobody wants you to be here, and no one wants to go through this. It's awful. It's one of the worst experiences I've ever been through. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But something that we do have to do is to accept that that's where we are, because the more we try to work ourselves out of that place, or jump out, or inertia ourselves out, the deeper we fall, because we have to store those energy reserves as much as possible so that we have something to build the ladder out of, because we're going to have to climb out of this ourselves with help, hopefully with support, with a lot of support. But we are going to have to build this to come out ourselves. And it's going to take a lot of self-care and a lot of self-knowledge. And it's going to be really important that we have first said, it's okay that I'm here. And there's nothing I can do about it except to go up from here. And that's what we do next, is that there is absolutely a way out. There's absolutely an answer. But the first step is, it sucks. And there's some grieving that happens when you first realize that you're really in the pit of burnout. Absolutely. Because there's a part of you that has known that you're not going to come out of it easily, and you just didn't want to admit it to yourself. And that's okay, because that's also normal. But it's not something that most of us have had to deal with a lot. And that's the reason why I wanted to talk more about the pit specifically, is that we feel like we should just be able to bounce back. But now it's been 2 weeks, it's been a month, it's been 3 months, it's been 6 months. For some of us, it's been longer than that we've been trying to work ourselves out of this creative burnout, or that we've been able to produce something for someone else, but not for ourselves. Your tank is empty. It's burned out at the bottom. You have to sit down there and fix it and fill it a little bit, and it really will be okay. Like, you'll come out of it. Absolutely. And this is something that I just want us to feel. It's important for us to feel this as a community, as a group of authors who care about what happens to this industry and who care about what happens to the readers who are impacted by the way that our industry produces products and produces books and experiences and stories. It's as important for them as it is for us to deal with this situation. And I just hope that as you are thinking about your energy and your ability to produce and create, that you will go back and listen to some of these previous episodes and be able to hear for yourself, am I in one of these stages? Do I need to think about what it means for me to either take a right or left turn or narrow the slide if I'm in that arena? Do I need to adjust what's on my plate if I am having a plate size issue? Do I need to be more conscious of how I'm spending my energy pennies and how I'm replenishing them? Do I need to accept that I'm in the pit? Do I need to build a ladder out? All of those questions are going to be important for different ones of us to answer. And I just hope that this has provided a little bit of a resource for you to be able to have some language to talk about it and to get support around it. And there are a ton of people out there who coach writers. Obviously, because I say that I'm a coach, you know that I also coach writers. I'm fine if you go to other people. I don't care who you talk to. I don't care if you pay them or not. I don't care if you see a therapist or not. I mean, I would rather that you see a therapist if you think you need to, but I want you to talk to somebody and get some support about this if you feel like this is where you are. Whoever it is, please talk to someone. Please get help, because this is a hard place to be, and you need to not do this alone, because you're not alone. We're all here. We'll help you. I hope that this episode has been helpful, and I hope if it has been that you'll pass it along to other people. My goal in doing this whole series is to try to help us collectively as a group to normalize and stabilize a little bit and to feel more safe in our desire to be a writer, and more safe in our ability to do something creative, and to not burn out, because that will leave a lasting mark on all of us. And I would rather nobody ever had to go through that. So I really hope that you'll be passing this along if it is helpful. There's always links in the show notes to how to get a hold of me if you would like to. There are multiple ways to contact me, but please do at least comment if this has been helpful, or if you have any questions. We love to interact with you, and I just want to make sure you're okay. Like, really, this is hard stuff to talk about. So I hope that you have a good week. And if it's time to rest, I hope you have a good rest. If it's time to sleep, I hope you have a good sleep. If it's time to replenish, I hope you replenish well. If it's time to write and work, I hope that your writing and working goes well. I just hope that we're all okay. All right, everybody, tune in next week to learn more about the ladder, and I will see you on the next QuitCast.